everybody. Welcome to ARE Live. I'm Patrick Finnegan, producer of ARE Live here at Black Spectacles, and I'm joined with architect Chris Hopstock, who's going to review several project development and documentation mock exam questions. We're going to go through questions that cover PDD knowledge and skills related to evaluating installation assemblies for code compliance, selecting specification type based on performance goals, writing specifications with proprietary product alternatives, and choosing elevator controls for residential, mid-rise, and specifying durable, low-maintenance materials for schools. If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is the leader in ARE prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. We've built everything you need to pass the exams, including new video lectures with motion graphics and 3D animation, practice exams that are as close to the real thing as you can get, and unlike anyone else, with our Pass the ARE guarantee, in the unlikely event that you don't pass your exams, we'll pay for you to retake your exam. You'll also receive access to our deck of flashcards, which you can customize, and quizzes after each video lecture section, and detailed content on the hardest parts of the exams. Lastly, our guided study process organizes all of your study material into a daily study plan, showing you what to study each day that you can customize to align with your exam date. And this is all built upon a curriculum that ensures you're learning the right content, and they all work together with our custom-built platform to ensure you retain the information so you remember it for the exams. With our ARE prep material, our pass rates are 40% higher than the national average, and our members report passing in half the time of the national average. And we just released a CSE course to help you pass the California supplemental exam in record time. You'll get everything you need to pass the CSE on your first try, including expert-crafted California-specific study materials, a practice exam that is as close to the real thing that you can get, customizable flashcards and quizzes, and a structured study plan customized to your exam date. You can join today at blackspectacles.com/CSE-pricing to take advantage of a 10% discount for the first 100 members that sign up. And if you're using Black Spectacles through your firm, be sure to let your firm leadership know so they can unlock access to your entire team. And over on our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook social channels, we post mock exam questions daily. So if you don't already follow us, I'd suggest that you do. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and just Black Spectacles on Facebook. And our next ARE Live will be on November 12th, where we'll be covering a PCM mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up. And we offer a referral program for firms and schools where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll send you a $250 gift card of your choice. To participate, you can follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. And we also offer a refer a friend program where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 50% off any membership. And in the month of October, you can access a special offer to receive a $75 gift card of your choice, which is normally $50 for every friend you refer in October. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And we're going to be engaging exclusively on our online Black Spectacles community. So head over to community.blackspectacles.com, and right at the top, you'll see we pinned a thread called ARE Live PDD Mock Exam October 2025. If you have any questions as we're going through ARE Live today, you can post your questions there and I'll bring them up live to Chris during the session. And anyone who posts in that thread today will be eligible to win a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. Literally, all you have to do is go to community.blackspectacles.com and say hi, and you're registered. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned until the end of the episode to see if you've won. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Chris Hopstock. In addition to working with us here at Black Spectacles, Chris is an architect based in New York. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for the intro, Patrick. I'm excited to be here today talking about PDD, project development and documentation. So a really common thing that we hear people talking about with this exam is that it's kind of confusing to understand what's on this exam versus what's on the PPD exam, and how do you really draw a line between those two so that you can study effectively for both. So I like to think of the PDD exam as being sort of the late DD/early CD phase of a project. The two D's in PDD stand for development and documentation. So when I hear development, I'm thinking about, I've got a conceptual design idea, I've got things, my space plan pretty locked in place, and I'm talking about bringing that conceptual design to reality. So there's going to be a lot of detailing, coordinating different building systems, things like that. When I hear documentation, I think, okay, same idea. I've got my conceptual design, but now I'm preparing some bidding or contract documents. That makes me think of specifications. and maybe choosing some materials for a project and things like that. So we're kind of getting into the fine details in this exam of a building. It's the last phase of the three classic design phases, ST, DD, and CD. And I think with that sort of understanding of what this exam covers, we can effectively study for it. So with that in mind, we've got 5 questions to go through today, and let's get started with the first one. An architect is designing a residential project in climate zone 6. The project team is currently comparing insulation options for the opaque exterior wall. The project manager has determined that the locally adopted energy code provides several prescriptive paths to compliance for opaque exterior walls. Option 1, R22 cavity insulation. Option 2, R20 cavity insulation plus R5 continuous insulation. Or option 3, R13 cavity insulation plus R10 continuous insulation. The architect has researched several products that the firm has used successfully in exterior wall assemblies and has noted their respective R values per inch. Number 1, fiberglass bats at R3.5 per inch. Number 2, XPS rigid foam at R5 per inch. And number 3, open cell spray foam at R4 per inch. Which of the following opaque wall assemblies meets the project's requirements? Check the 4 that apply. A, fiberglass bats in a 2x6 stud wall cavity. B, open cell spray foam in a 2x6 stud wall cavity. C, fiberglass bats in the 2x6 stud wall cavity and 1 inch of XPS rigid foam. D, open cell spray foam in 2x6 stud wall cavity and 1 inch of XPS rigid foam. E, fiberglass bats in the 2x6 stud wall cavity and 2 inches of XPS rigid foam. And F, open cell spray foam in the 2x6 stud wall cavity and 2 inches of XPS rigid foam. That is a really long question. That took me just a long time to read out loud. So you might be wondering, how can I possibly be expected to answer a question like this on the ARE in about 2.5 minutes, which is the average amount of time that you have per question? The truth is, some questions will take a little bit longer, some might be a little bit shorter and just be requiring you to have knowledge of a specific topic. This question is a little bit more detailed. There probably is a quick way you can answer this question. I'll go through the long way, but if you're really familiar with this information, if you're familiar with designing exterior wall assemblies and different insulation products, you might realize that you could just find the 4 choices here that give you the highest composite R value, and those are going to be the correct answers by definition, right? We're looking for an opaque wall assembly that complies with the energy code, so the answers are going to be the 4 options here with the highest R value. So you could kind of just look at this and figure that out if you're comfortable, but let's go through some things to think about. And you might want to flag this question for later if you're uncomfortable with the topic, right? Every question is worth the same amount of points, so it's not necessary that you spend 5-6 minutes on this question, particularly if it's early in the exam. So let's talk about some vocabulary to answer this question first. So the term opaque wall appears a lot. When we talk about an opaque wall, we're just talking about the portions of your exterior wall assembly that have no windows in them, just the solid wall itself. So we know in real life when we're evaluating exterior walls for performance, we're going to consider the whole wall, the composite R value of the windows plus the wall, and we're going to do a weighted average there to figure out the composite R value or U value. This question is simpler than that. It's just asking us about the solid or opaque wall. We've also got cavity insulation and continuous insulation appearing throughout this question. So cavity insulation simply means the insulation that is going to be installed in the wall cavity or between the studs. Since it's between studs, it's not as effective as an insulation because the studs are thermal bridges. And then we've got, on the contrary, continuous insulation, which is insulation that is generally installed outboard of the studs, and therefore there are no thermal breaks in that. It can be sort of a continuous blanket around the building. So with those definitions out of the way, we could kind of just go through these choices, do some math, and figure out what our correct answers are. So choice A is going to be our simplest option, fiberglass bats in the 2x6 wall cavity. So we're told that these fiberglass bats are 3.5 per inch, and we have a 2x6 stud wall cavity, which we have to be careful with that. 2x6 studs are actually 5.5 inches deep, right? So we're going to every time we're talking about the R value per inch of a material that's installed in 2x6 studs, we want to be multiplying by 5.5 inches, not 6 inches. So if you take the R 3.5 and you multiply by 5.5, you come up with an R value of R 19.5, and this is cavity insulation. So our requirement up in the top bullet point there is that we need R22 minimum cavity insulation, so choice A is not going to be correct. Choice B, we've got a very similar situation, but a different material, so open cell spray foam in the 2x6 stud wall cavity. So we can do the same process there and multiply our 5.5 inch stud depth by our R4 for this material, and we end up with R22, which so happens to be the minimum cavity insulation R value that must be achieved. So option B is going to be a correct answer. Option C, fiberglass bats in a 2x6 stud wall cavity, and this time we're adding 1 inch of XPS rigid foam on the outside. It's going to be continuous insulation. So that we're not redoing a bunch of math, we can realize that the first part of choice C here, the fiberglass bats in a 2x6 stud wall, is the same option that we had in choice A, right? So it's going to be R 19.5. For the cavity insulation. We're also adding 1 inch of XPS rigid foam. If we multiply that by our R5, we come up with a total R value for that of R5. So that is not going to comply with any of our choices there in the top 3 bullet points. We are not meeting R20 cavity insulation, so the R5 continuous insulation is not sufficient. So choice C is incorrect. At that point, we're choosing 4 out of the 6 answers here, and we've already identified 2 incorrect answers. So we got a little bit lucky with the organization of the choices here. We could kind of just stop if this was the real exam, choose D, E, and F as being correct, maybe flag this for later and just double check that they are correct, and be more confident in our answer. But that's sort of the one of the things that you can do is just make sure you understand how many correct and incorrect answers there are to a check all that apply question. And maybe you don't have to actually analyze all the choices. You find your incorrect answers and then you're done. If you wanted to continue with this question and just double check your answers, we could look at D, open cell spray foam as cavity insulation with 1 inch XPS rigid foam. So that works out to an R22 for the cavity and R5 for the continuous insulation. That complies with the second bullet point there. That's at least R20 and R5 continuous, so that's correct. Fiberglass bats in the 2x6 stud wall plus the 2 inches of XPS rigid foam, so that works out to an R19.25, sorry, plus R10 continuous. That complies with the third bullet point option in the first paragraph. And then finally, choice F, open cell spray foam, cavity insulation, and 2 inches of XPS rigid foam. So that works out to R22 plus R10, which again complies and is a pretty well insulated wall that complies with the third bullet point there. So maybe you'll get lucky on your exam and you won't necessarily need to go through all the choices, but that's how you would go through the math on a question like this and come up with your correct and incorrect answers. So if there's no questions on that in our community, I guess we can move on to question 2.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we actually have one about kind of PDD overall, and they're asking how much time should we allow for the PDD Black Spectacles exam material if they're studying for 1.5 hours a day? What would your suggestions be on that?
I would probably need to dig a little bit deeper into exactly how many hours of content we have. I feel like for PDD, it's a long exam. PPD and PDD are long exams. We have a lot of content for both of them, and they're 100-question exams, so it's just a longer process. I think our 60-day study process for PDD does a great job of getting you prepared. So I would recommend our 60-day study process there.
And with that, let's roll on to question number 2.
All right, an architect is working with a client on a new library project. The architect is currently preparing specification section 12-32-13, manufactured wood veneer faced casework. After discussions with the client, the architect notes that the client's main concern is that the plywood and finishes utilized are low VOC, that the casework is constructed according to accepted industry standards, and that the contractor can obtain competitive quotes to keep costs down. Which of the following types of specification should the architect prepare? A, proprietary specification, B, performance specification, or C, reference specification? So one thing I'll just note with this question is we were given the spec section of 12-32-13. It's irrelevant. We don't need that to answer the question. It's maybe nice to know what division of specifications we're talking about, but you'll see a lot of PDD questions that reference specification numbers, and you're not expected to memorize all of these specifications, because in real life, you're going to have master spec open in front of you. You'll be able to reference that. So you're not going to be asked a question like what product is covered under specification section 1232-13. It's just not something you're expected to memorize. The real key to this question is you need to understand the different types of specifications that an architect could write. And this is kind of a favorite question type that comes up on PDD. I would expect to see some questions that are asking you to make the best choice about what type of a specification to write for a given product on your project, given sort of XYZ owner concerns. So the three primary types of specifications are a proprietary specification. In that type, you're providing a specific name of a product that you want the contractor to procure, and that's all that's going to be acceptable. So if this question said the owner really wanted plywood from XYZ Plywood Incorporated, that would be a really good way to make sure that the contractor buys that exact plywood for the project and the owner's getting exactly what they want. Performance specifications say that any product is going to be okay if it meets certain performance requirements. The classic example here is for cast in place concrete, or really any concrete, when you specify the strength of the concrete that has to be met. You're not telling the contractor where to get their concrete, you're just saying if it meets these certain strength requirements, these performance requirements, whichever product meets those requirements is okay by me. So that's a performance spec. And then a reference spec is kind of similar. You would use this type of spec when standards are really important. So like industry standards about doing things like building cabinets, for example. And when meeting certain testing criteria is going to be valuable to that specific item. In reality, many specs use multiple of these methods within one spec section. So you might mix and match performance and reference specifications in reality. For the ARE, usually questions are simplified kind of like this one, and you're just going to choose one type of specification. So with that base understanding, let's look at some keys to this question. So we're told that the owner wants low VOC materials. So how can we determine what a low VOC material, like what material is low VOC versus not low VOC? And VOC stands for volatile organic compound. It's a chemical substance that gets off-gassed in certain materials like the glues that are used in plywood, right? So it's harmful to health. So generally you want to keep VOCs to a minimum or have no VOCs in your project. So low VOC is important to our client. We have to think about how can we tell the contractor that we want some low VOC products. Client's also looking to meet some acceptable industry standards. So maybe for manufactured wood veneered faced casework, so cabinets, maybe there's some sort of council that publishes a reference standard for that type of product so that there's sort of uniformity across people who are making that sort of thing. They can meet a standard as opposed to just building what they think is acceptable. And then finally, we're told the owner wants some competitive quotes to keep costs down. So whenever I see the owner wants to keep costs down or wants to encourage competition, when we're talking about specs, proprietary specs are out. Because if you write a proprietary spec, it's just one product is going to be acceptable. So that just eliminates competition and the price is going to be the price, right? So that's called a closed specification. You're only accepting one thing. And when I hear competitive quotes, keeping the cost down, I'm thinking open specification. So right there, I can kind of eliminate choice A. So just to recap there, we're looking for some sort of open spec, which is going to be either B or C here. We are looking to specify somehow that our product is going to be low VOC, and our client wants to make sure that this product is meeting some acceptable industry standards. So that really checks all of the boxes of a reference specification. We can specify that we want these products to meet certain maximum VOC content requirements specified by some ASTM testing standard that we'll find and specify. we can do some research and find out what is a really good manufacturer standard for this type of product and include that in our reference spec and give that to our contractor so that they have some things to go by when they're sourcing this material. So I think C is the best choice here, a reference specification for this manufactured wood veneered faced casework.
Thanks, Chris. Looks like we have one question kind of going back to question number 1. So I'm gonna roll back there. If you have any questions on 2, feel free to drop them in our community and I'll bring them to Chris. But for question number 1, they're asking, why is the stud depth 5.5?
Oh, great question. So this comes down to studying light frame wood construction and just dimensional lumber, right? So when we talk about a 2x6 stud, 2x6 is what's called the nominal size of the wood. So when they cut down a tree, it's going to be cut into 2x6 pieces, right? Actually 2x6 pieces. From there, the wood gets dressed and gets basically planed down to a bit of a smaller size. That makes the wood straighter and more uniform. So when they take a 2x6 stud, they're going to remove about a 1/2 inch of material in both directions, and you're going to end up with a 1.5 by 5.5 inch stud. That's the actual dimension. And the same can be said for all types of lumber products. So like a 2x12, for example, is not actually 2x12. It's 1.5 by about 11.25. So if you definitely want to study and sort of memorize those differences between actual and nominal dimensions.
Sweet, thanks. And with that, and then can we roll back to question number 2? Can you give a little bit more specification? Someone's not really understanding why they would choose reference specs over performance for question number 2.
Yeah, performance specs are really used for, like I said, things like concrete where you just need to meet a certain performance requirement, right? Low slope roofing might be another good example of where you're purely concerned with the way this product performs. It's not something that's going to be seen. It needs to do its job. And if it does that job, it's a great product, right? A reference spec might be used where, in this case, we're talking about casework, so cabinetry, right? It's something that's visual. It's part of the design of the like visible design of the project. So we're going to want to, we can't really put performance criteria on that. So we're going to want to be able to rely on some sort of a reference standard that says this is what good manufactured wood veneered casework looks like.
And then kind of going off that too, why not performance if you want the floor to have a certain performance when it comes to the VOC?
So like I said, you might mix and match some specs, like maybe the VOC. I don't think so though. I think you would still be referencing a certain testing method for VOCs for maximum VOC content. So you're providing that reference standard. And when you ask for submittals, one of the required submittals will be something that tells you that this product meets the maximum VOCs allowed. So I still think when you're talking about some sort of a product that's going to be seen and visible in the project, reference specifications make more sense, and performance specs are more for purely performative elements of the project, like I said, concrete or roofing or WRB in an exterior wall assembly, something like that.
Great, thanks. I got one more question about this one too, and then I also see someone that just hopped in the webinar. Hey, yes, this is being recorded, and I'll have the recording out later today on YouTube and then also on any of your podcast players. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that too. So you can click back and rewatch this whenever you want, and all of our past episodes as well too. And then Chris, one more question for number 2. Even if there is no specific industry standard that is trying to be met, you can still specify a reference spec. Isn't the desire for low VOC a desired quote unquote performance?
Well, it's not really. So when we're talking about performance, we're talking about how the product is going to perform in the building. So again, like concrete, we're specifying the strength that we want our product to meet. A VOC content it's not really a performance quality. It's more of a, like, the material just has a certain VOC quality, and that's what it is. So we're looking to specify what that VOC content, the maximum VOC content that we'll accept is. And once we specify that, the contractor will show us some documentation that the material met that reference, that standard according to whatever test we determine is the most appropriate. and then we'll be able to approve or not approve that product.
Sounds good. And then going off that, I just want to make sure if you've touched on this, but how is the performance standard written? Is it mostly like a narrative?
So for the concrete, for example, you would specify like the minimum compressive strength of the concrete that you want to meet, whether that's 3,500 PSI, 4,000 PSI, something like that. So it would probably just be in list format. I want my material to meet this requirement. If you're talking about a vapor control layer, you're going to specify the performance that you want that to meet, the minimum or maximum perm rating of that membrane or material, and you might specify what testing method you want that to be achieved with, right? So yeah, I think you've got to think about what specific performance criteria you're looking for, and then how can the contractor display compliance with that performance criteria.
Thanks. And just had one more roll in for question number one. For question number one, how can we know that on the first question they were talking about wood studs?
I guess that's a good question, but I think so when you see 2x6, that's a nominal wood dimension, right? I think if you're talking about metal studs, I don't know that you would call them 2x6. You'd probably call them 6 5/8 inch metal studs. That could just be my bias though, because we use a lot of wood studs where I am in the Northeast, so that could totally be a bias. But that's something that could happen on the ARE, right? Like the ARE questions are written by architects who practice in a specific area that might not be your area. So I recognize that's a challenge of answering some of these ARE questions. So you've got to make some sort of an educated guess about what they're talking about here. And I think the fairest thing for this question to be is when you see 2x6, just know that that's probably a wood stud and it's going to be 5.5 inches deep. I actually don't think I would have to check, but I think if you go through the math, whether you use 6 or 5.5, you'd probably still come up with the same answers. But still, it's something that could happen on the ARE, and you might have to make an educated guess like that.
Great, thanks, Chris. With that, let's roll on to question number 3.
All right, question 3. An architect is preparing contract documents for the newest location of a successful restaurant with an existing restaurant completed. The owner worked with a different architect on the previous project and was happy with the flooring used there, a wide plank oak flooring by HV Industries. The client also wants to understand what the pricing would be if they use an engineered oak flooring product by QR Flooring Incorporated instead. How should the architect prepare specifications for the flooring? A proprietary specification listing HV Industries and QR Flooring Inc. as acceptable manufacturers. B, a performance specification listing the qualities of HV Flooring Industries oak flooring. C, a proprietary specification listing HV Industries with a requested alternate for QR Flooring's engineered oak flooring. Or D, a proprietary specification listing HV Industries with a substitution request for QR Flooring's engineered oak flooring. So a similar question to question number 2, this requires some of the same base knowledge of like what do these types of specifications mean, and why would you use one in a situation versus another. Question is really asking, how can we prepare a spec so that bidders can get the client the information they need so that the client can make an informed decision about which product to use, right? So this client, the question is saying, wants to choose between 2 wood flooring products. They have a favorite, they've used it before, they like it, but they want bids to be able to be easy to compare always, and they want a price for the second product so that they can compare pricing. So with that sort of base knowledge, we can go through these choices here and find our best solution. And let's go through these choices and think about, if we prepare the spec this way, what kind of information is the contractor going to, or what kind of information are the bidders going to give us when they give us their pricing? Choice A, proprietary specs listing both HV Industries and QR Flooring Inc. as acceptable manufacturers. So you can write a proprietary spec with multiple manufacturers, but if you do this, and let's say you bid this out to 5 different bidders, you're going to get a few bidders are going to provide you a price for HV Industries flooring, and a few bidders are going to provide you a price for QR Flooring Inc. And you're not going to have both prices from both contractors so that you can make a fair decision. It's going to be hard to compare all of your bidders' pricing because they're going to be pricing different things. So it's really not a good solution. You in bidding in general, you want to encourage bidders to always to be providing you the same information in the same format so that you can compare them easily. So I think choice A is not a great option here. Let's take a look at choice B. So performance specification listing the qualities of HV Industries oak flooring. So you might be thinking this is a good choice. Our client likes the HV Industries flooring. They're really happy with it in a previous project. Why don't we just get a performance spec listing the qualities that they like and see what the bidders come up with. I think that's not a great option here. You know, the owner really liked this. We know the owner is going to like this flooring if they get it. So there's kind of a risk management thing that we can think of here of like, they're not going to come back and say this flooring turned out to be terrible. You picked a poor choice here. We know that the client will be happy with this. They're just looking for maybe some different pricing for a cheaper option if they can save some money. So I don't really like a performance spec here. I don't think performance specs are great for a product, again, that you're going to see that's a really important thing in the project, like flooring in a restaurant. I think of performance specs more for purely performative parts of a project. So I think B is not a great choice here. Let's take a look at choice C. So choice C and D actually are very similar to each other. So C talks about a proprietary spec listing HV Industries, the client's favorite, with a requested alternate for QR Flooring's engineered oak flooring. And then D is kind of the same, but it's asking for a substitution request for QR Engineers oak flooring. So what's the difference between an alternate and a substitution request? So alternates are what architects include in bidding documents in exactly this scenario where we have a basis of design, we have the product that we wish to be included in the design, but we're looking for some pricing for some other products that might be acceptable as well if the pricing is good. That's the definition of an alternate. A substitution request is something that happens when bidders or the contractor want to substitute something in your design for something that they think would be a good idea. It's something that happens afterwards. So architects never ask for a substitution request. We, in our Division 1 specs, will provide some guidance on how the contractor should submit a substitution request, but you're never going to be asking for one. You would instead ask for alternates. So for that reason, choice C is the correct answer here. If we go with choice C, we'll get pricing from every contractor for HV Industries flooring, our client's favorite, and we'll have a separate line item saying, probably in this case, here's how much you can subtract from that price if we go with the engineered oak flooring instead. That would allow us to compare everybody's base bid and compare everybody's alternate fairly. We'd have all the information at our disposal and the client can make an educated choice.
Thanks, Chris. Not seeing any for question number 3, but I'm gonna roll back to question number 2. Looks like we just have one more from there too. And this is around, could concrete meet a reference spec though for the strength?
This sort of goes back to what I was talking about, where in reality, you're going to mix and match specification types when you write a spec. So like when you say what PSI you want, what compressive strength you want your concrete to meet, let's say 3,500 PSI, you're going to spell that out, and that's the performance standard that you want to be met. You're also going to say that you want that to be tested using some cylinder testing and some maybe insight testing, right? Following some certain standardized ASTM methodology for doing that. So you're actually going to mix and match those in real life. In my experience, the ARE doesn't get into that granular level of detail. So they're going to write questions that are, there's a more obvious answer where mixing and matching is not going to be part of the answer. That's just my experience with ARE, and I wrote this question that way so that it would be sort of, there are a few clues in this question that lead you to want to choose a reference spec instead of a performance spec.
Sounds good, thanks. And with that, let's roll into question number 4.
All right, finally a short one. So question 4, an architect is designing a new 10-story multifamily residential project with 2 traction elevators. The project contains 45 residential units, a small fitness center, and a lobby and a mailroom on the first floor. Which type of elevator control system is most appropriate for the project? A, single automatic push button, B, collective, C, selective collective, or D, destination dispatch. So this is almost just a a knowledge-based question, right? You need to know what these 4 options are, and you're applying that knowledge a little bit because you're given some parameters, some very simple parameters for a building, and you're going to select which is the most appropriate elevator control system. So when we're talking about elevator control systems, this is talking about how is the elevator going to actually determine where it's supposed to go and when somebody pushes a button in the elevator lobby, when somebody pushes a button in the elevator car itself, how is the elevator processing that information and determining where to go? So let's just go through what these 4 choices mean, and then we can talk about, there's a really simple rule of thumb at the end to talk about which of these is most appropriate in a given situation. So single automatic push button. This is really only used in small residential and maybe a small industrial project. So think about a residential elevator in a house. It's just 2 or 3 stories, or maybe a small industrial building with a couple of floors, right? Where the people using the elevator they work at the building. The way this works is once a passenger is in the elevator, that elevator is theirs. The elevator is going to ignore all other requests until that passenger is dropped off. It's kind of, the elevator has a one-track mind. It picked up this passenger, it's going to drop them off and then do whatever else it needs to do afterwards. It is pretty inefficient in that way. It could lead to long wait times, but it's the simplest way of having an elevator operate, and therefore it's the most cost effective. Collective control. So this elevator, just look at the word used there to describe it. Collective, it's going to collect passengers, but it's going to ignore the direction that they're traveling in. So let's use an example here. Let's say the elevator at the first floor going up to the 5th floor, it would pick up passengers, right, on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors who actually want to travel down. It would pick them up, take them to the 5th floor, and then go down to the lobby and drop them off. That would result in a longer trip for the person who wanted to go up to the 5th floor because it's making all these stops to pick up passengers. And it's pretty frustrating to everybody that got on the elevator trying to go downward. They're going upward now. Why is this happening? Kind of a frustrating experience all around. It's really not used. It's probably never going to be a correct answer to an ARE question, but it exists as an elevator operation choice, and therefore it's on this list. Selective collective builds on that. It's way better, and it's collective. It collects passengers, but it's selective in doing so. So it considers the direction passengers want to travel in. So in that same scenario, right, we've got the person on the 1st floor in the lobby. They want to go up to their apartment on the 5th floor. We've got people on 2, 3, and 4 that want to go down, right? This elevator would pick up the passenger in the elevator lobby on the 1st floor. It would drop them off on the 5th floor, and then it would pick up the passenger on 4, 3, and 2 as it goes downward, bringing them all to the 1st floor. Benefits of that, the person on the 1st floor going up to 5 gets there faster. The passengers that want to go down, they actually get where they're going in the same amount of time, but it's definitely preferential to wait in an elevator lobby rather than being in an elevator that's going in the wrong direction. So a very versatile elevator operation type. Destination dispatch, our last choice here. This is the most complex. It's really only used for large high-rise buildings. If you've ever been in a large building in the elevator bank and you're asked to put in the floor that you want to go to when you're in the elevator lobby itself, and then the elevator controls tell you which car to get into, that's destination dispatch. So there's a computer that's grouping passengers by their destination for super efficiency. It's used in high-rise buildings because you need your elevators to be really efficient in that situation to get people where they're going in a reasonable amount of time. So this is definitely the best. It's like the Rolls-Royce of elevator operation, but also going to be the most expensive, so not applicable to all situations. So with that explanation here, let's just go into some simple rules of thumb. So if you have a really small building, you can use single automatic push button. If you've got a huge building, a skyscraper, something like that, if we're talking about hundreds of thousands of square feet, I don't know, 50, 60 floors, destination dispatch is going to make sense. For really anything else, selective collective is going to be your best option here. So going back to our question, 10-story residential building, 45 residential units, a couple of other small fitness center. I think that falls into the anything else category. That's not a skyscraper and it's not a very small building, so I would pick selective collective for that one. And I think selective collective is going to be an answer very often on these types of questions, just because it's a very versatile and common elevator control system. If there's no questions there, we could move to the last one.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, no questions on our end. With that, let's roll on to the final one.
All right, an architect is working on the renovation of a local high school's athletic field. The renovation includes the playing field itself, a new running track around the field, and a small new building that will house locker rooms and a restroom for home and visiting players. The client, a school board, is most concerned with ease of maintenance of the new facility and longevity of materials. Which specification sections are appropriate for the architect to include in the bidding documents? Check the 3 that apply. A, gymnasium equipment, B, metal lockers, C, wood lockers, D, resilient athletic flooring, E, tub and shower enclosures, or F, commercial showers. You'll notice that the choices here list the specification section, and I didn't even read it because it's not relevant to this question. It's really not providing you much additional information to answer it. Don't waste your time thinking about it on the ARE, and let's just look at this question under this lens. You're the project manager, maybe you're working with the spec writer on this project to determine what specs need to be included in your bidding documents. And we're gonna take our brief description of the project here, a little athletic field getting renovated, a new field building with some lockers and restrooms. And we're gonna choose the most effective products to meet the client's requirements, which in this case are ease of maintenance for the new facility and longevity of materials. Very common things to be concerned with in a public building like this that you want to last a long time. You're spending taxpayer dollars on it, and people might be a little bit rough around a building like this. You know, it's not somebody's home. People just tend to take a different level of care in a public building like this versus you know, a private residence or an office space, even something like that. So with that understanding of what kind of building and project we're designing here and what the client's concerns are, let's take a look at these choices. So choice A, gymnasium equipment. So this might seem enticing to choose. What you need to realize is that we're not designing a gymnasium here. We're designing an athletic field. That's an outdoor field. Gymnasium equipment is talking about things like basketball hoops and stuff like that. That goes in an indoor gymnasium. So when you see the word gymnasium, that's always going to be an indoor space, and we're designing an outdoor field here with a field house. So I would say that's probably not going to be correct. Choices B and C are both lockers. So when I see 2 choices like that in a check all that apply question that are very similar to each other, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to choose one of these, and there's going to be a great reason why I choose one over the other. So metal lockers versus wood lockers. What do we know about metal versus wood? Well, metal is going to be a lot more durable, right? If it needs to be, if it gets dinged or something, it's still going to be functional and usable, whereas a wood locker, you could probably break it and need to replace it. Metal is just going to be way easier to maintain. It's going to last a lot longer. And it's something you commonly see in a public locker room or something like that, right? So think about places you've been and what types of materials were used there. I think it's much more likely you're going to see metal lockers in a local high school's athletic facility versus some wood lockers that are going to be harder to maintain. So I'm going to choose B here and not choose C. So I've got 1 correct answer here. I'm looking for 3. And now I can move on to choice D, resilient athletic flooring. It's got the word resilient in it. We know our client is looking for longevity and ease of maintenance, which are all things that make me think of resilience, right? So resilient athletic flooring is going to be some sort of rubberized or flooring like that. That would be great to use in a locker room. You're not going to want to use wood flooring or maybe even a tile flooring where if something heavy gets dropped on it, you're going to crack tiles. A resilient athletic flooring is going to stand up to really whatever is happening in this locker room. People bringing equipment in and out. It's probably a really good choice for this building. So I would choose choice D, and then looking at E and F, we've got similar situation as we had with the lockers. We have to pick one more correct answer. We're choosing between tub and shower enclosures or commercial showers. So when you see the word commercial, I want you to think more durable and something that's meant to last a little bit longer. That's typical of commercial grade products. So definitely going to be more appropriate for a sports facility. Anything that's covered in the spec section for tub and shower enclosures is really, we're talking about like glass doors that would be used in a residential shower. Probably not appropriate for an athletic facility here. So with that, we've got our 3 correct choices that all seem like they're going to last a long time: metal lockers, resilient athletic flooring, and commercial showers.
Thanks, Chris. Looks
Yeah.
like we got 3 questions rolling in for number 4. And then if you guys have any questions about number 5, feel free to drop them and we can come back to that too. But just looking at number 4, can you answer why it wouldn't be the single automatic push button?
Yeah, single automatic push button. So if you think about a building with 45 residential units, right, 10 stories, you're going to have at least 100 people living in this building, probably, depending on the unit mix. A lot of people using the elevators. There's going to be certain times of the day, like between 8 and 9 a.m. people are going to school, going to work. A lot of action on those elevators, right? You don't want your elevator with single automatic push button control. If somebody gets on that elevator on the 10th floor and they want to go to the lobby, they're going directly to the lobby and not picking up anybody on any of the other floors who want to do the same exact thing. It's terribly inefficient. So let's say there's somebody on every floor in this building that wants to go to the lobby at the same time. Well, if the elevator gets to the 10th floor first, it's going to go from 10 to the lobby, then go maybe from 9 to the lobby, 8 to the lobby, just terribly inefficient. So it's really only used, like I said, in maybe a 3-story building max, and one of the keys, not even number of stories, but just number of users, right? In a private residence, you might just have, I don't know, 5, 6 people at most, maybe even, let's say 10, that want to use that one elevator. It's never really going to be in a high stress situation like that where you've got multiple people all trying to use it at the same time.
Nice. And then also, could you go into why you would suggest the selective collective for this one?
Yeah, so it's really if you get in an elevator in any sort of like a medium-sized building, it probably utilizes selective collective control, and for very good reason. It's going to group passengers, so it's not going to do what I just said, where all these people want to go down, but they're on different floors, and we're just going to do one stop at a time, right? It's not going to do that. It's going to collect them, but it's also going to consider the direction that the car is already traveling. So you never are in the car or in the cab, whatever you want to call it, traveling in the wrong direction. That's really disorienting to people when they're in an elevator, to be going in the wrong direction than they wanted to. If that's ever happened to you, you feel like you forgot to push your button or something, or you just feel like something's going wrong. So it's just a very common and effective elevator control system that I think most elevators we've all ever been in probably used it.
Thanks. And then one more around this one too. Can you talk about, do the elevator controls ever rely on the elevator type?
Irrespective of elevator type, however, you could theoretically use any elevator control system with traction or hydraulic elevators, right? But think about hydraulic elevators are only used in low to mid-rise situations, right? So destination dispatch by definition is going to be used in only really tall buildings. So I think you'd have a hard time finding a reason to use that with a hydraulic elevator, although I think technically possible. So I think maybe that's the only caveat I would say to that, but otherwise they're sort of not related concepts.
Gotcha. And then one more for question number 4, and then I see we have one around question number 3, and then I'll also hop back to question number 1 too. But for this, can you compare selective collective to destination dispatch, please?
Yeah, so selective collective is going to it's only receiving the information about where people want to go once they get in the elevator, right? So it might be really busy in an office building, and 10 different people get in that elevator and they want to go to 10 different floors, right? So that elevator is going to make a ton of stops. Destination dispatch might say, okay, there's 10 other people waiting for an elevator. I'm going to tell them to go in a specific elevator because I've got 3 different people that all want to go to the 15th floor. So why don't I put them in the same elevator so that we only have to go to the 15th floor once, instead of having 3 different elevators go to the 15th floor? just because those 3 people got in 3 different elevators. So it does the passenger sorting before passengers actually get in the cab. There used to actually, when elevators came around in the turn of the 19th century, there used to be a job for people that would direct people. They would ask you which floor are you going to, and they would sort of do this sort of thing themselves. They would direct you into a certain cab and try to group passengers. So I guess this is an example of technology like doing that more efficiently and working itself into the system rather than having a person do it.
Great, thanks. I'm going to roll back to question number 3 so that we can see the answer for that. But then also, Chris, for this kind of like actually talking about like test day on it. But for this exam in particular, do you recommend taking a break during the test?
I think that's a personal question, but I think if you have reasons that you might need a break, whatever those are, I would practice taking a break when you take your practice exams. And if you think you're going to do best if you can just lock in and sit there for the full exam, and that's the way your mind works, I would do my practice exams that way as well and get used to it. So I personally took breaks during my exam, just that's what worked for me. But I would say, and that goes for everything you're doing on test day, like practice it, make sure it's a routine. You don't want any surprises on test day. You don't want to be wondering, am I going to take a break during this test? Figure out if you're going to take a break, figure out when you're going to take it about, and then try to execute that.
Gotcha. One more just rolling around in question number 4 too. Chris, would it be appropriate to use a destination dispatch system if this were a high-end residential building?
I mean, I guess if the question said something like the developer or whoever the client is for the project, that they really wanted like a fancy high-end system that blah blah blah, then I think maybe you'd have a reason to choose destination dispatch. But and also if this was a 60-story building, that would probably make sense. It also doesn't make a ton of sense with just 2 elevators, right? Because the whole thing with destination dispatch is it's sorting the passengers into certain cars based on where they're going. But if you only have 2 options, it doesn't really have a lot of an effect, right? People are going either in cab A or cab B. So maybe if some of that information was provided in the question, but it's more of a function of the size of the building and the number of elevators. Bigger, taller buildings are going to have more elevators. It's more of a function of the size of the building than like the level of quality of the building.
Great, thanks. And then our last question for today is actually rolling back to question number 1.
Okay.
Chris, this one has a lot of math in it. Is there any faster way to calculate the R value if we have to? They're unsure how we got to our answers.
Yeah, so it has a lot of math in it if you do the math for every answer choice individually, right? But what you'll notice is, let's take a look at choice A is fiberglass bats in a 2x6 stud wall cavity, right? And then choice C is that same thing plus something else, 1 inch of XPS rigid foam. So don't do the math again for choice C because you already did it for choice A, just add that 1 inch of XPS foam. So you'll practice doing things like that. Like I said when I introduced the question also, is if you're just kind of familiar with designing exterior wall assemblies, you might recognize that open cell spray foam is going to be, first of all, the question says it has a higher R value per inch than fiberglass, right? But you might just also know that. So you might know that B is always going to be better than A, and also that D is always going to be better than C, right? And then E and F, they have 2 inches of rigid foam on the exterior. That's a lot. You might just know that. So you can, if you're really familiar with this type of topic, you might not do any math and just answer it. Maybe check it if you have some extra time. But I might just choose B, D, E, and F, knowing that, and then flag this for later and come back and do the math when I have some extra time.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I think that is all of the 30 questions we rolled through. That was one of our longest ones we've had, but truly appreciate you helping us out today.
Yeah, that was great. I was surprised by all the elevator control questions. I really enjoyed that topic, so I'm glad I was able to answer those for you all. And that's a favorite topic on the area, I think, because it's very concrete and easily testable, right? There's some information that's just easy to write a question about. I could write 50 different questions about elevator controls, just write different buildings and ask which is the most appropriate. So I like to talk about questions like that because I think there's a chance you'll see them.
Chris, it's been such a pleasure to have you today. Thanks so much for helping to support the architecture community.
Yeah, thank you.
If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is a leader in ARE prep. At Black Spectacles, we work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. And we recently just announced a new CSE course designed to help you pass the California supplemental exam in record time. You'll get everything you need to pass the CSE on your first try, including expert crafted California specific study materials, a practice exam that is as close to the real thing as you can get, customizable flashcards and quizzes, and a structured study plan customized to your exam date. You can join today at blackspectacles.com/CSE-pricing to take advantage of a 10% discount for the first 100 members. And if you are using Black Spectacles through your firm, be sure to let your firm leadership know so they can unlock access for your entire team. Over on our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook social channels, we post mock exam questions daily. So you can go over to Instagram and TikTok at black.spectacles and just Black Spectacles at Facebook. And our next ARE Live will be on November 12th, where we'll be covering a PCM mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up. And we offer a referral program for firms and schools where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll give you a $250 gift card of your choice. To participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. And we also offer a Refer a Friend program where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership. And in the month of October, you can access a special offer to receive a $75 gift card of your choice, which is normally $50 for every friend you refer in October. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And congratulations to Sergio Max Talamoni. You posted on our Black Spectacles community today and you just won a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. I'll reach out to you via email to get your size and shipping information, and I'll be in touch soon. And just a reminder, if you'd like to be eligible to win a free Black Spectacles t-shirt, all you have to do is post a question you have about our featured topic in our community during our next ARE Live. And our community is always active, not just our ARE Live. So poke around and see what your peers are up to and asking about. And finally, after the episode, be sure to take our survey, which you'll find in your email, and share any suggestions you may have. I promise we read every word that you write and use them to tune our next episodes. Thanks for tuning in.